Chapter 2, Basic Principles and Concepts, Parasite Systematics, Ecology and Evolution. Parasite Ecology, Part 2. Where we left off with Part 1, we were talking about the different gastrointestinal tracts and, of gastrointestinal tracts of the hosts, and how these differences allow for different niches that are going to promote or discourage the survivability of different parasites, and how the parasites have adapted and evolved with us to maximize these different niches. We also have to keep in mind that there's gastrointestinal tracts and there's there's digestive systems from the parasite's point of view. That their different abilities, their different structures throughout the different larval and adult stages within the life cycle of that parasite are also going to push towards one niche over another. And these niches that are going to be required are going to be different depending upon which stage that parasite is in its life cycle. Certain larval stages don't want to be in the gastrointestinal tract. They actually want to be in the tissues of the host, because that's where they're going to get the correct nutrients, the correct oxygenation. They're going to get the signals required to, tell the parasite to go from one stage to the next of larval development. And all of that's going to be completely different when that intermediate host is eaten by the definitive host, and the stomach environment, the small intestine environment are going to be digesting away the intermediate tissues, leaving the parasitic larvae, which now is getting the signals to finish development and enter into the sexually mature adult stages. Larvae have different nutrient requirements than the adults in the gastrointestinal tract. You look here, Fasciola hepatica. Parasite that you go from A to B, C to D during its development. A, B, C, larval stages. D is the adult, the sexually mature adult. Now, it's a little hard to see in these drawings, but there are going to, during these different stages, there's going to be different internal organs, internal, tissues, different digestive tissues. A is going to be just small enough, lacking in advanced tissues for digestion. So it's going to just be absorbing all the nutrients. You get into B and C and you'll get the slow development of internal digestive tissues. And then you get to D and you actually have a rudimentary gastrointestinal tract. A rudimentary tissues that we would start to see as the evolutionary beginning of the gastrointestinal tract, to show you that the reason why there's going to be different niches throughout the different stages of the life cycle is that, at a first glance, A, B, C, D, and E are all different organisms. But it's not until we look at them and compare them together that we begin to see that no, it's the same organism, just at different points along its development. Different points requiring different nutritional value, different nutrients and different environments. First thing we have to take into account is how it gets in. Think of the beginning of the parasite's infection as colonization. Colonization is when an organism gets onto a certain place that it's never been before, not only does it land there or get in there, but it also has to establish, evade the host response, and then begin development division, increasing population numbers. So the parasite not only has to get into us, but then it has to adapt long term, and if we think even big T time, we also start to think of as the coevolution. Some point in time, hundreds of thousands, not millions of years ago, a parasite somehow was ingested by one of our mammalian ancestors. Maybe one of the hominids, maybe, I forget, Homo erectus or one of those, ate something new. Well, then that something new was a parasite it's never been exposed to before. Well, there you go. That parasite is now on its way to colonizing Homo erectus. We kept it, and it just kind of got spread around the group of Homo erectus. And there begins the colonization, the beginning of the coevolution. We have to keep in mind that when we see these infections occurring, are we referring to Cenozoic or Histozoic? Cenozoic want to live in the coelom. Okay? Got to remember, from your mouth to your anus, you are actually a hollow tube. That hollow tube may have some protrusions, protrusions into the bile duct, into the gallbladder, into the liver, dead end, things like that. But starting at the mouth, the lips, the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, our shrunken cecum, which I personally believe is what the appendix is, a rudimentary leftover of the cecum, large intestine, rectum, anus, out you go. We are a hollow tube that way. So the intestinal parasites are living in that tube, and that's where they want to be, in that tube. But you also have other histozoic parasites that don't want to be in the tube because the tube is hostile environment. It's like us, getting into a hot spring. We're going to cook, and depending upon what's in the hot spring, we're going to get digested by the ammonia, by all the chemicals and the compounds. Not where we want to be. Histozoic parasites want to be in the tissues. Remember the cutaneous larval migrans from, the first lecture. Necator wants to be in the tissues. That's where it has spent millions of years evolving to survive, to flourish. To increase the chances, parasites have also adapted over the millions of years. They have evolved mechanisms that allow them to flourish within their given niche. Okay? It could be physical. As we're going to see in a couple of chapters from now, some of the parasites have evolved to have pellicles, which is going to be kind of like a hardish outer shell that's going to protect them from immune cells, protect them from gastric juices. Some of them are going to have developed, locomotion mechanisms that allow them to glide and swim through tissues. Their nutrient requirements are going to have evolved and adapted to what will be readily available in their given niche. The overall nutrient abundance for parasites that are going to be in the small intestine, large intestine, is going to be quite a bit different than the nutrient requirements for something that is growing in the tissues. Okay? The available nutrients in the gastrointestinal tract are going to be greater than what's in the tissues. The nutrients that are in the tissues is going to be much greater than a parasite that grows, an ectoparasite, on the surface. As we go through and we begin to look at, as you see this figure here, all of the different places that we can find on just us humans as a host for parasites, all the different places we can find parasites. You look at this figure from the textbook. It's listing out, in the different areas, what you could find, trichinosis in the lungs, schistosomiasis in the liver, pinworms in the rectum, body lice, malaria in the liver, trichomonas in the vagina. All of these different parasites you see listed here, and there's many, many more that they just didn't put in. They're all in competition. And this competition, we're starting to see, could also be what has driven the adaptation and the coevolution of parasites with their given hosts. We go and we catch wild animals. We talked about this in chapter 1. Wild animals are going to have parasites. It is a given. It's how many different species, and of those species that are present, how many, what's the load for each one, the parasitic load. We see that there's this battle, not only parasite load and health of the host that seems to be in battle, but it's also the different loads between the parasites. Parasites within the same species, parasites between species. If one parasite gets too high and overloads the host, everybody dies. So there needs to be a balance, not only between host and parasite, but a balance between the different species, and within the species, the given number. Too high, everybody dies. Too low, nobody really flourishes because they're holding back too much.